They told me you can't just take a place that's been built back from nothing. But that's the thing, people keep thinking property is about lines on a map. It's not. It's about the sound of your boots on a floor that used to be rafters, the smell of coffee you taught that kitchen to make again, the nights you sat on a porch and learned to breathe without someone else's permission. My name is Evan Blackwell, and I rebuilt a house everyone told me was a lost cause, then watched someone try to steal the right to live in it. It started the way most fights do around here. Small, polite, easily ignored if you wanted to be that kind of person. A casserole at the door. "Oh, welcome back." That sounded sincere. Lydia Carr, tall, hair always pulled tight like she was trying to corral more than her own life. She brought bread and a smile the first week I moved in. I took it. I was on my knees in drywall dust and pride, and a warm loaf felt like community. But manners are thin when a power play begins. They rip like tissue when the motive underneath is greed or control or something that smells close to both. You need the picture before the boom. This place, Hollow Ridge, not the official name, had been left to rot for 30 years. I bought it at an auction for less than a used car, scraped together cash from odd jobs, a tired savings account, and a divorce that had left me with fewer things and more stubbornness. Renovating it felt like paying back a debt to myself. Nights sleeping in a bunk under a tarp, mornings with hands that remembered the grain of the wood. Slowly, the bones of this house woke up. It's amazing how a place can change your breathing. Lydia's change came in stages. First, the neighborly smile. Then the "did you know the association has rules about," which turned into petitions slipped under my door for the safety and harmony of Hollow Ridge. The petitions looked neat, printed like they'd been done in an office that smelled of lemon cleaner. They carried the weight of procedure, and that's the dangerous thing about procedure. It sounds reasonable until it's used as a weapon. There were signs. Lydia started appearing at community meetings with a binder of complaints, too tall a fence here, an old shed over their items that sounded petty until you lined them up next to who she was and who she wanted to please. She'd smile at people who mattered, and when no one was watching, she'd call names and dates into her phone, a list of reasons this place shouldn't belong to me. I kept a journal not because I expected paper to save me, but because writing is how I stayed sane. The journal became proof. Timestamps, photos from the camera I was forced into installing, receipts for repairs after someone misplaced a window. The real escalation was a slow-burning thing. Cars that didn't belong in the neighborhood showed up and left with boxes of things that weren't mine. Anonymous letters hinted at legal counsel, at evidence of abandonment. Once, a moving van pulled up and a man in a suit marched in as if he owned the place, his hand on a clipboard like it was a crown. I asked him what he was doing. He said, "This is a scheduled inventory, with the kind of certainty people borrow when they're about to bully someone." I filmed him. He left when the cameras clicked. The suit was never seen again, but the idea that the house could be claimed by paperwork and pressure had been planted like a seed. And that's when I learned how methodical Lydia was. She knew the paths people took who they'd speak to, who would back them because they'd been courted with casseroles and smiles. She knew the HOA board's weak spots and how to make public opinion look like common sense. It wasn't about me being terrible. It was about me being inconvenient. I was single, messy, loud about my repairs and loud about my rights. I called friends. I called a lawyer. I called the sheriff to explain the pattern. You don't call until you mean it, because every call costs you yours and sometimes your neighbors. The second act hit when the gate incident happened. We'd installed an automated gate at the end of the gravel drive, not to be snobby, but because strangers were showing up, and because the first night I slept here alone, I woke to a set of headlights and a radio playing outside my window. The gate was a line you crossed when you were invited. It was also the line they chose to test. It was foggy the morning Lydia chose to drive up. She had a car full of people who looked like they'd rehearsed being outraged. She pulled a brass key from a velvet pouch, the kind of key you put in a movie where someone expects dramatic entry, and she smiled at her friends as if the grin itself were enough to open anything. The key didn't turn. The keypad blinked red. A small triumph, right? Except what she did next was clinical. She knocked and called out like she was owed the night, then raised her voice so neighbors could hear. "Evan," she called, voice even and practiced. "You can't keep people out of their property. This is community property. You know this isn't your house." She tilted her head like I'd mispronounced the name of a deity. "It is what it always has been," she said. and for a second I saw the truth in her eyes, not a lie, but a story she'd been telling herself for years. This property has a history. My family has ties. You could have asked, I said. You could have come to talk. She laughed, a sound that wanted to be warm but landed cold. I tried to be neighborly, she said. But sometimes a place like this needs order. Behind her, one of her cronies held a folded paper like evidence. I couldn't make it out. I stepped closer. You don't get to declare what order means here, I said. Not without everyone. She put on a look, then sympathy and a little rage, like the two had married and had a child. You rebuilt this house, and you brought chaos. People don't like chaos. We just want things to be like they were. I remember the next few minutes in detail because they mattered. The sheriff's cruiser that I'd asked to be nearby, a favor paid forward from a neighbor, Deputy Ruiz stepping out, hands in a non-threatening place. We have a complaint, he asked. Lydia's smile faltered. We're trying to see documentation, she said. We have a right to. She offered papers. Ruiz took them and thumbed through, then looked at me, then back at her. There was a charge that could have happened: trespass, something petty, something that would have made me spend nights in court, but the deputy looked at the timestamps, at a security camera clip I'd uploaded before he arrived, and he looked at Lydia's paper and then at the faces of the people behind her. This is harassment, he said plainly. He used that word like a hammer. It landed. Lydia's shoulders tightened, and something like panic flashed across the faces in her crowd because the thing she'd been building, the puppet show of legality, relied on other people not looking closely. When someone does look closely, these schemes fray. Her exit from that morning was not cinematic the way movies pretend. There was no heroic speech, no dramatic collapse. There was instead a slow, red-faced trudging back to cars, a cold silence that settled like dust. Later, the evidence she'd tried to use was shown to be a bundle of misfiled forms, signatures that didn't match, dates that couldn't be verified. The HOA board, which had been her stage, sent a note reminding everyone that due process matters. The community, who had been primed, started to question the narrative she'd set up. But endings aren't tidy. The victory felt like a wound healing pain, then a scab. People that had cheered Lydia on looked at me differently. Some apologized, others didn't. Lydia kept her power in other ways. Gossip is a tool as sharp as any legal brief, and I learned that having the law on your side doesn't stop people from making your life uncomfortable. Some nights I still wake to the sound of tires on the gravel and wonder if the next morning will bring a new kind of siege. What changed, truly, was less about judges or sheriffs and more about me. I stopped building this house to prove something to the world and started building it for the quieter reasons. For the man who used to be scared of silence, for the way the light finds the kitchen in late afternoon, for the dog that showed up one day and decided our porch was the best place on earth. I learned that property is both public and private, a stage for politics and a refuge for breathing, and that we're foolish when we pretend it's only one thing. So here I stand now, porch light on, gate closed, not because I want to exclude, but because I learned the hard way why some lines matter. People will argue about what justice looks like. I'll tell you this, justice didn't look like a courtroom drama. It looked like a neighbor stepping up to confirm what was true, and a deputy willing to read papers instead of headlines. It also looked like community members finally asking questions, and that matters more than an early victory. If you've ever had to defend a piece of your life, a home, a title, a name, tell me about it below. Do you think I was right to close that gate and make them prove themselves? Or should I have opened the door and trusted better? Where do we draw the line between community and ownership, between protecting what's ours and letting others in? Drop a comment, tell your story, and let's talk about what justice looks like when it's messy, because that's the only kind worth arguing over.